So while the 100 Years' War is often remembered for the English spanking the French in their own backyard, the French did try and take the fight back to English soil. However, they were deterred by the greatest defensive ditch of all time, the English Channel. In 1385, the Scottish, united with the French in their hatred for the English, asked their pals to come over and make so great a hole in England that it will never be recovered, with the plan being a French expeditionary force sailing to Scotland and then launching raids into northern England with the Scottish, while a much larger French force gathers on the French coasts and then invades England further down the line. The French expeditionary force consisted of roughly 1,500 well-equipped and trained troops, a gift of roughly 50,000 francs for the Scots, which was no small amount, and the best gear and equipment of the time to arm the Scots to face their old enemy. However, it wasn't long before this amazing plan soon went tits up. The expeditionary force, having grown accustomed to the lavish lifestyle back in France, were aghast at the miserable conditions the Scottish castles were in, with no tapestried halls or soft beds, stating they didn't know what poverty meant until now. In turn, the Scots also despised their pompous guests, and when the English put an army into the field to take on this alliance in the north, they both argued on how best to take on the English, with the Scottish wanting to take on a guerrilla war and avoid a pitched battle at all costs, while the French wanted to take English walled towns and settlements. To make matters worse, the French invasion force was delayed due to disruption in neighbouring Flanders. However, at this point the English had withdrew from Scotland due to lack of supplies, but not before raiding and devastating much of the south of it. However, when the French expeditionary force tried to retire back to France, the Scottish were like nah, held them hostage and forced them to pay for all the damage they'd done for the farmers' crops and food supplies, among other insults, with the French captain paying this and hurriedly scuttling off back to France. The invasion of 1385 was a massive disaster. However, it didn't dissuade the French too much, as they had another roll of the dice the next year, avoiding the Scottish at all costs this time. The invasion of 1386 was to be a continuation of that of 1385, and was planned to be the greatest since God created the earth, and perhaps a second Norman conquest. And there was no better time, as the Duke of Lancaster, one of England's top boys, had waltzed off to Spain to claim the crown of Castile through the right of his wife, with roughly 7,000 troops, leaving England thin on the ground in terms of funds and able-bodied men to put into the field. The invasion force had now swelled to what contemporary says over 100,000 troops, with 40,000 knights and squires, 50,000 horses and 60,000 more foot soldiers, and although this is probably a massive exaggeration, it was a bloody massive force, with the French now getting roughly 1,200 ships from all across Europe to ferry them across the Channel. A huge logistical effort was underway to supply all these troops, which included over 4 million litres of wine, with the French forced to devalue their coinage in order to pay for it all, and probably the most magnificent part of it all is they had a giant erectable fortress to take across the Channel and then erect once they got into England. The giant fortress was to be 9 miles across, with walls 20 foot high with towers every 10 to 20 metres, and it included every building required for the French to have a base of operations in England, and it could all be assembled in apparently 3 hours, which was probably a great technological achievement. However, the French dithered and delayed due to one man. The Duke of Berry, one of the regents of France while Charles VI came of age, was far more interested in pursuing fine arts and other trinkets of the world than he was in pursuing warfare with the English, and his non-arrival at the invasion force cast doubts into everyone else's minds, as if he wasn't in it, was the decision to invade England unanimous, and was it gonna work? As the Duke was still nowhere to be seen, things went from bad to worse for the French, as 72 of their ships carrying this portable town up the coast from Rouen to the Scheldt, where their forces were amassing, were attacked by English ships from Calais, and they captured 3 of these ships with some of the portable town on them, but most importantly what was on them was the master carpenter of this whole thing. By the time the Duke did arrive on October the 14th, weather conditions across the Channel had now turned sour, with his arrival sparking a massive storm, as if God had smited them down for his delay, and after a few weeks of indecision, by November, it was decided that the weather conditions were too awful to cross the Channel. This giant invasion force, which had done absolutely nothing except cause ruckus in the local area, was now disbanded with supplies sold on the cheap and this giant fortress given to the Duke of Burgundy. However, the French French would try again next year to invade England. However, this time it would only be a small raiding force, but that was soon forgotten about due to French internal struggles. Hostile weather conditions, indecision, and having to land on a hostile beachhead all deterred the French from crossing the Channel because the English had the greatest defensive ditch of all time, which even Napoleon or the rampaging Germans in World War II couldn't cross, because the English knew the importance of the old medieval saying, if you make ditches, you get bitches.